Green screen in ScreenFlow. How do we do that? That's the subject of this video. Here's a clip, and this actually comes from another green screen video that I did for the Camtasia course, but there's an element, there's a little piece, segment, a 1-minute segment up front that I want to play for you because it applies just as well whether you're using ScreenFlow or Camtasia, and it's sort of a little bit of the background on green screen, or Chroma key is another thing that you might hear about. Okay, so take a listen. This has to do with green screen. A lot of people do like to use green screen because you can kind of put this nice background behind you or make it look like you're doing a presentation from space or from the Grand Canyon or something like that, okay, or from an office space or something like that. Okay, so green screen is fine, but the thing is a lot of times you can kind of tell, right? It's like bad CG sometimes, where you can kind of tell when someone is just, you know, they're just overlaying green screen in the background. So my guidance actually is to not use green screen just for the sake of using them because they're fun. Otherwise, if you're looking for a white background or something like that, then just get yourself a white background or a black background or something, or just, you know, put yourself in a nice room, a nice office kind of a setting. All that being said, green screen was a big effect that a lot of people were asking for. Now, there's some things that are key about green screen effects, okay? Lighting is very key. So my guidance is, if you can't get your lighting correct, then don't do green screen because you can't skimp on that. You got to have your key light that shines on your face, but you also got to have then lights that it's going to shine on the green screen panel itself. So that's the front end segment that I want to make sure that you got as well. So that's a little bit of the background on that. And the lighting is important. So let's just go ahead and take one of these clips here and let's just focus on that because I want to sort of divorce this this video from all of these other things that you see in the timeline here. This was from a different other project. You and I are going to make our own project here today. So let's just go ahead and take this one little clip here, and I'm going to go up to the edit menu and click copy. All right, and then we'll just go ahead and minimize ScreenFlow, or actually we're just going to go ahead and open up a new project. And in my course, in an earlier module, you know that you can open up multiple document projects or project documents inside ScreenFlow. So here we're going to go ahead and click the new document, and then we'll leave this at a width and height of 720 by 1280, and we'll go ahead and click OK there. So now I'm in this new project document here. I'm going to go back up here and we'll paste in that clip that we copied over from the clipboard now. So let's go ahead and bring the timeline up a little bit here so we have a little bit more room to work with. So there's our clip. Now, so here's the thing I want to point out with the lighting issue. Okay, so see how this lighting, this part of the green is a little bit more lighting than this. So this is a little bit darker. For all intents and purposes, computers will look at that and essentially it's a different, you know, we'll consider those to be different shades of green. Let me show you the issues that you might have if you were to use a different type of a color, and that it can actually be a different color. So here's one. I'm just going to go ahead and bring in from another project where it's kind of doing a proof of concept for a client. Okay, so let's just focus on just that segment for just a second. Now we're going to throw this away. This is not the clip I want to use for this tutorial, but it's going to be problematic, and I want to show you some of the problems that you might have with green screen if you're not using green or a blue, you know, like a sharp, bright blue type of a background. So this one's a little bit more grayish in the background here, and the problem that we have with that is gray and probably the range of difference between gray and my black shirt, or gray and my brown skin tone, and my black eyebrows and my black hair and so forth is probably not as far apart as, say, if we were to just use a contrasting color. Oh God, let me just zoom out here for a second here on the timeline. So as if we were to use a green kind of a background that contrasts very nicely with the black and the browns and the blue in the foreground and so forth. You'll see this more prominent here in just a second. So if I was to come back over to this clip over here, again, not a very flattering frame there, so let's use this one. So if I was to use this and then to apply green screen, now here's how we're going to apply green screen. So you have to select the clip that you're looking for, and then one thing I do want to just kind of address in this video is a lot of times people bite on this one and then they wonder why these properties are all disabled. And the reason is because even though that looks like a video and you think you might be applying it to this video over here, that little icon, it's actually related to screen recording. So that's a screen capture video that gets captured on your, you know, with ScreenFlow when it's recording your computer desktop screen. What we're really looking for is this little tab over here. Now if we click that, it says video right there. And indeed, this is a video clip. It's an MP4 video file. And so these properties now are activated relative to that. ScreenFlow is smart enough to kind of know that. Now you get down to the bottom here, there's video filters. If I was to expand video filters, there's nothing down there right now. It's basically going to be blank. So what you'll want to do to activate green screen is actually first recognize that it's not called green screen. It's actually called, click the plus button, it's called Chroma key. Because what we're actually doing is, now that you know that you can have a different background color, it can actually, if you've looked at some of the on your evening news, when you watch the weathercaster, sometimes they're actually using a green screen behind them, or they're using a blue screen behind them, and in the background somebody's just basically overlaying an image of the map. The map doesn't actually sit behind the weathercaster on the news. It's basically being projected onto either a green screen or a blue screen, and then they're just basically removing that chromatic color. Hence we have chroma key is what we're really looking for here. So we're going to go ahead and click add, and automatically what ScreenFlow tries to do, it goes ahead and activates it, and then it goes in and sets these default settings for white clip, tolerance, and angle. I'll explain this in just a second. Now here's the challenge. So remember how I said that in this particular case, in this particular clip, again, this is going to be a throwaway clip, and we're going to have some problems with this one. So I turned off chroma key for just a second. It's a grayish clip, and it's, there's a shadow here, so automatically this area of the gray, the bluish gray background is going to be different than this area of the bluish gray background, because you see that, see where the shadow is right over here, okay? So that's going to be problematic. Plus, there's color spectrum wise, this is probably similar going to be, as we start taking away color, that's really what we're doing here, is we want to take away color such that the background shows through. And in this case, our background is black. So as we start taking away color, sometimes what ends up happening is the software will then start cannibalizing other colors that are sort of similar to that one, or in the sort of collateral damage, if you want to think of it that way, right? Because that's what we're really trying to do, is when we activate chroma key, is we're trying to get it so that the black background shows through. But sometimes, see where you have a little bit of lighting color in here, light pixelation, that's really a little bit of the foreground color, a little bit more of this foreground blue, or grayish blue, that's still sitting in the foreground that we need to remove more of. And so that's when you have to then go down here and start playing around with things like, well, what color really do I want to remove? So maybe you take this away, you click the color over here, and when this refine key color comes in, then you can maybe define a different pixel of blue that you want to try to remove. So maybe it's going to be this one that's just right next to my neck. So we click that little guy, see where that little bullseye target kind of shows up? That means that pixel right there is sort of what this whole gray color is going to try to remove. So we click that. That's a little bit better. We've gotten a little bit more of that, the foreground in there, but still we want to remove a little bit more of that. So we come down here. White clip, I don't have to worry too much about that, but essentially what that is if we have anything on me, either I have a white shirt, or I might have a white pocket protector or something like that, then some of the background might pixelate through that white color, in which case then you can use this slider to make some of those fine-tuning adjustments. We don't have to worry about here because I don't really have a lot that I'm wearing that is white. So we'll leave that wherever it was before, 225. All right. Tolerance is going to be this thing where, how much are we going to allow the software to tolerate what we consider to be this grayish blue, this color that we want to remove? So the way I like to think about that is to bring in a color wheel. So let's take a look at a color wheel here for a second. So tolerance would be this thing. If you focus here for just a second and say we're in this kind of bluish area, it's probably like around in here, so where my cursor is right now. So that whole area right there is, we might say, well, we can say specifically that color is what we want to remove, or we might say let's tolerate a little bit more slop in here, so as we start getting in the spectrum on these other areas along the spectrum to the left and right, of that color space, then we will tolerate that as being that color we want to remove as well. So we start increasing the tolerance here. But this is where you start getting into areas where the black at some point and the brown starts becoming tolerated as well at some point, and then so the software might start pulling some of those pixels out too. So that's where it becomes really important to make sure that you've got a nice contrasting background, and that's why a lot of folks use green or blue. Here, our gray wasn't all that contrasting, so we're having to muck around with tolerance a little bit. And just to eliminate the mystery, angle is this other thing that sort of works along with tolerance, and quite frankly, I can't quite wrap my head around angle. So let me just point out, there's also a nice little ScreenFlow help if you go to the help menu here. So ScreenFlow, if you were to look up Chroma key, so applying the Chroma key filter, but what I'm really looking for is what the meanings of these different settings are. So we know about white clip, we know about tolerance, but angle, when you get there, it says that it's really about specifying the angle around the chosen color. The amount of color varies depending on how far from the center of the color space the selected color is. So if you know what that means, put a comment below and explain to me how that's different than tolerance. But for now, here's how I'm wrapping my head around it, and I'll show you just basically the practical way that you'll probably want to apply it. Where angle comes in is basically how far from the center of the color space, so how deep are we going and so forth with that, okay? So that's kind of how I'm wrapping my head around that, and in any case, they sort of go hand in hand. So what you want to do, try to eliminate as much of this foreground pixelation as possible, is play around with the tolerance a little bit, play around with the angle a little bit, and so this is where the art of all of this stuff comes in, such that at some point, you know, maybe you've removed enough of that, so the background's showing through. So it looks like we've got a lot of the foreground. Let me turn off Chroma key for a little bit. So a lot of this gray, bluish gray area we've been able to pull out, so when I put Chroma key back on with those settings applied, then the black shows through. It's now transparent. And here's what happens. So when you add a clip into the bottom part of that timeline, so let's say it's grab this cubicle farm here. So grab that, put it in the timeline, and it has to be, we're trying to get it in the canvas so it shows up behind this guy, okay, so he's going to be in the foreground, and so we want to put it behind. So what that means is in the timeline, it translates to the clip that you want to be behind has to be on the lower track, the bottom track, okay? So here's that. Here's the effect if you switch them around. If you put them around, then basically then that thing shows up in the front. See what I did in the timeline here? Bring this up just a little bit, so I'll drag this and bring it back down, and then now that shows up behind, such that you can then expand that color or that clip. Oops. Grab both of them. I just want to grab the bottom one here, which is the one behind in the canvas. So I'm going to push the shift button on my keyboard and click and drag, so that way we're scaling proportionally. Now, some folks ask me about this as well. If I didn't push that shift key, I just let go of the shift key now, then what you end up doing is you distort that image. So you want to push the shift key and then pull it out, so that way pull on any of the corners, and what that's going to do is it's going to expand, it'll expand that clip proportionally. Right? So now here's another challenge that we have. So remember that cannibalization I was talking about? So some of that tolerance and angle settings that we were doing here on this clip when we were playing around down here, now we're starting to cannibalize into my shirt and probably a little bit of my hair. So that's where you just kind of have to maybe pick a different color. So if we come in here, we play around with the color, we refine that color key a little bit more. Oh, it looks like we're kind of getting it there. There you go. So that might be a little bit better, okay? But those are the challenges that you're going to have, and which is why the setup for the Chroma key effect is such that you want to have this background, so you don't have to muck around as much with this, you know, the art of trying to get those tolerances and the angle correct and so forth. You want to have this as the foreground and the background as contrasting as possible, and that's why a lot of times we use green or blue. So let me go ahead and delete this. We said this was going to be a throwaway, and we want to focus just on this green over here. Let's expand the timeline so we have more to play with, right? So now you know what we're talking about with this green background and the foreground being contrasted. And now you know how we apply the Chroma key effect. Basically, you select the clip. Then what you're going to do is select the video tab. When you first put your clip in the timeline and you come down to the video filters tab and you expand that, again, you're not going to have anything in there. No problem, just click this little plus button. That brings up the list of different filters that you can kind of play with here. So there's blurs, there's styles. Not the subject of this video. You can play around with that the next time you record something from your family picnic or Thanksgiving or a holiday or something like that, okay? What we're looking for is Chroma key. Again, having to do with chromatic filtering. We're going to add that down into the video filters here. ScreenFlow does a great job of interpolating all of the settings that it might possibly need. And look, it's already fairly perfect over here. Now, there might be some areas where we might have a little bit of imperfection. Sometimes I get a little, like for instance, right back behind here, look at where my seat is, right? So the edge of my seat and maybe the edge of my hair here, there's some green sort of kind of bleeding through. You might not see it necessarily, but it doesn't feel right to me. So what we might do there is, we might just go ahead and play around with tolerance a little bit. See, now I'm able to pull it in just a little bit more. So maybe play around with tolerance just a little bit, and maybe a little bit of that angle to make it a little bit tighter. Okay, there. So that's looking a little bit better to me. All right, so that's not looking too bad. So now when we put that cubicle farm in the timeline, then it shows around pretty nicely. Let's expand that. Again, we're using the shift click and drag method. So now my cubicle farm is sitting nice behind me. Let's go ahead and expand the clip in the timeline so it covers the entire length of my video clip, such that as I scrub through, you can see that he's just talking along, and that background's looking pretty nice. Okay, so it shows through. All right, now here's a little bonus thing. Turns out we're using a static background here. We're using this little cubicle farm, right? Turns out you don't actually have to use just a static image. You can even use another video can be back there. So let me grab one of these video guys. So here's just a little kind of a minion video here that I got from the internet, just so kind of take a look at what that looks like. Bottom. Okay, so he's a little kind of a funny guy. So if we were to take him and put him behind me here in the timeline, now what we have is basically the little minion guy is kind of creepily standing behind me here. Okay, so that's kind of a cool little trick. And just for full disclosure, where I got him, by the way, is from this guy's YouTube page. This is Roll Media 3. So he's offered this for free as a download, so I'm just going to go ahead and subscribe to him. Why? Because I think it's cool when folks are out on the internet and they're giving back to the community, and they're helping educate the world. And that's what this guy's doing, is basically providing free resources for us to be able to download so we can all expand our skill set. So subscribe to Roll Media 3. That's my little plug for him. Basically, so now I've downloaded this clip. I know your next question is going to be, how did I download a YouTube video clip? Post your comment, your questions in the comments below, and I will explain. We'll make it a subject of our ongoing discussion here. But basically, here we go. So we got the little minion guy now behind me. So what you can see is it doesn't have to be just a static image. You can actually have nice little videos behind you. Bottom. See how that works? Okay. Now, while we're here, let's move this guy over just a little bit. So we're focusing on the minion guy. See how this green is really it's uniform all the way across. If I was to click at any point along here, that RGB code, so to speak, is going to be the same as it is over here. It's just pretty uniform color, and that's your best bet for green screens. And that's why a lot of times if you were to download other videos, you can actually make nice little promos of yourself here. So check this out for just a second. So if you were to use this video clip, and then we were to apply the green screen or the chroma key to that guy, right? So again, he's not applied yet to this clip, which is the minion guy. So we're going to have remove the green. So we'll go over here, apply chroma key, and ScreenFlow is going to automatically try to apply it, and it does a great job of doing so. So that looks pretty clean to me. There's no pixelation or anything like that. So now what we can do is actually put me on the lower track, so I now show up behind him. All right. So now what we have is I'm the creepy guy sitting behind the minion guy. Bottom. So now that should start giving you some ideas on what else you can do with that. You can maybe reduce. Whoops. Let me undo that. I can maybe take that clip of me in the background there and shift and click and put me down in the corner, right? So now we might start thinking about putting text up here where that's now your little promo video or something, right? Let's go ahead and expand the timeline here a little bit, bring this out. Here's another example where what I did was, let me add a couple of clips, and I just created these little sample promos. I just did these quickly in ScreenFlow, or not ScreenFlow, in Keynote. You can do the same thing in PowerPoint perhaps, and then just export those slides as little JPEG files. And now what you got here is a nice little, put this on the bottom, drag that down. So now you have the inklings of a sort of a promo clip of yourself that you can create, right? Click and drag that, expand that, fit that in the timeline a little bit. Very nice. And then maybe we take that other one and bring it over and say do a little bit of playing around in the timeline that you've all been able to learn in the course. You know how to move things around in the timeline now. So essentially what I'm going to do here is just real quick and dirty fashion. These are just basically JPEG images that I exported from Keynote. You can do the same thing in PowerPoint or Photoshop or whatever else. And then now you have the inklings here of a nice little promo video.
Bottom.
And then maybe at some point I have me, this little talking guy over here, sort of fade out maybe at this point in the timeline. And let's just go ahead and put one of those video actions, which again you learned in the course. And then we will take that guy and at some point we'll just fade him out so he disappears and we're just left with the promo pieces here, right? So let's go ahead and expand that. Here's another little trick. See how this clip is a different size than this first clip over here? When we had this first clip, that first clip sort of takes a whole side or the whole canvas. So what I can do here is click that clip and just basically copy and paste its properties over to this clip. So click this, edit, copy. Then we click the other clip that we want to paste the properties onto. We select that, go back up to edit, paste properties, and then select video, the same type of media type. Now what you have is basically we've got the exact same parameters and so forth. So what I'm going to do here now is gather a little promo video, and you can do the same thing here.
Bottom. Video.
So there you go. So green screen effect, pretty easy in ScreenFlow. Chroma key filter is what you want to use, and it doesn't have to be a static image. You can actually overlay different videos on top of each other to create some creative presentations. Hope you got a lot of this. If you have any questions, post your comments and questions below, and let your friends know. Talk to you later.